Hey, my name's Alex Hope. I'm a songwriter and a producer, and today I'm going to show you how to get started with Logic Pro X, which is the software that I use to make music. Firstly, thank you to She Is the Music for putting this together. I never studied music production, so a lot of my learning was through watching YouTube videos and Googling and asking other producers a bunch of annoying questions, and just playing around in the software, trial and error. So we're just going to start from the very beginning today when you first open up Logic. So when you first open it, you're going to select New from Template, and this is what you're going to see. So we're going to start with Empty Project. And basically, it's going to ask you what kind of track you want to start with. So software instrument is our MIDI. Audio is if you have a microphone or something plugged into your interface. Guitar or bass is same if you have a 1/4 inch, plugged into your interface. Drummer, we're not going to cover right now. And external MIDI, we don't need to worry about. But software instrument, so we're going to start with MIDI. So we're going to go down here, and these are the kind of instruments and settings that Logic is providing us. We're going to start with just a vintage electric piano. So we create that. And this is our arrange window. So this is our main window. I would recommend, if you're using Logic for the first time, this quick help button is pretty rad. If you have this on, basically everything that you hover your mouse over, it's going to give you a little kind of description of what that is, and it's also going to tell you the key command for that function. Obviously, these guys are pretty self-explanatory. Your stop and your play, your pause, your record. This is your loop button. Here is your control bar. So we can customize this. Logic gives us a bunch of different options here. I kind of like to customize it, so I would go to custom and then I'd right click and just get rid of anything that I really don't care about right now. But basically you have your tempo, you have your time signature, you can have your key signature, all that stuff is up here. So our BPM here, that's going to translate to our metronome, which is this guy. So if we hit spacebar right now, we're going to hear 120. So we can drag this down or drag it up to change the tempo. We can also right click and hit metronome settings. If we want to change the tone of the metronome or the volume of the metronome, etc., we can do that in there. All right, so right now we have our electric piano. If we double click here, we can just type it in so we know what's going on. And as long as we have record enabled, we're good to go. I have a MIDI keyboard plugged in. If you don't have a MIDI keyboard, you can always use musical typing, which is Command K to bring that guy up. You can also just go to Window, Show Musical Typing. If you forget any of these kind of functions and shortcuts and stuff, you can always go to Help. Just type in musical typing and it will just direct you to where you need to go. I have a MIDI keyboard plugged in, so I'm good to go. This is our volume here. Panning right and left, how much, if you want to hear more on the left side or the right side. Kind of get back to that later, but I'm just going to record some electric piano right now. So let's hit record. All right, so we've tracked some MIDI stuff in here. If we double click, it's going to give us the piano roll. So if you go in here, you can see that I wasn't totally on the grid or in time. So what I can do is right click, select all, and then over here you have time quantize. So basically you can just nudge everything so you're exactly on the grid, you're exactly in time. So if you watch here and I hit this guy, you're just gonna see everything line up. You obviously have a lot of other settings depending on the kind of music that you're making, but right now 16ths works fine for me. The different colors is related to the velocity or how hard or soft I hit each key as I played. Your velocity is down here, so you can mess with it if you wanted to select, say you wanted the last chord to hit a bit harder, you could select it, drag that guy out. And it would hit harder. If you want all of your MIDI to be the same velocity, you can select all functions, MIDI transform, fixed velocity, and you can basically just type in, we're gonna go with 100, select and operate. So now you're all the same velocity. It's basically the touch and the feel, and that's something you can very easily mess around with within the piano roll. If you want your chords to extend to meet the next one, you can select all. I mean, rather than doing it manually, which I used to do a lot, and kind of drag it out manually, you can select all, go to edit, trim, and go to force legato. And basically this will just drag out every note to meet the next, which is super helpful. You can also obviously change the key. You can drag your stuff anywhere you want. If you don't play piano or an instrument, you can also just draw in MIDI. Up here you have, this is our main cursor, which right now we have the pointer as our main cursor, and this is our secondary cursor, which is the pencil tool. So if you hold down Command, you're gonna get this pencil tool, which basically means that we can just draw MIDI in. Drag it around, change the velocity, etc. So that's our pencil tool. Up here, we have the same situation. We have our main pointer tool. Right here, for example, this is, a tail that I don't want in my MIDI, so I can go here and I can hit the scissors tool. As long as I'm holding down Command, I can just kind of cut where I want. Really like that. Our loop, which we have up here, is this guy that we can mess around with. Right now, I obviously just want to loop what I've done. Which is just that. All right, cool. So let's look at adding something else. If we wanted to add a duplicate track, if we wanted to add, another electric piano or another MIDI sound, you can always hit this guy here, which is our new track with duplicate settings, which is basically just going to replicate the track that you have going on right now. But we're going to just put a kick drum in. So we're going to add a new track, software instrument. We're going to go down here, drum kit designer, hit this, and Logic is going to give us this guy. I'm just going to grab the kick right there and drop that in real quick. Return to get to the front and about project. super sloppy kick. And then we can go in here. When we double click, we can go in here and we can select all and quantize it so that it's super tight. If we want to mute that track, we just hit M. If we only want to hear that track, we're going to hit S for solo. We're able to pan if you want to hear the electric piano in the right a little bit more, and the kick maybe slightly to the left. Get our loop going. If we're bored of this electric piano sound and we want to go over here to library, we can go and find another instrument. If you go to piano, it's a Steinway. All right, so now let's look at tracking some audio. Once again, let's double click and just name this guy. Also, if you want to stay organized, you can right click, name and color, show hide colors. You can basically just make things different colors so you can keep up with what's going on. It helps if you have a lot of tracks. But let's add some audio. So I have a guitar plugged into input 2 on my interface. So so the little orange eye, that's your input monitoring. It's basically just picking up that input. And as Emily was saying in the previous episode, you really want to like make sure that your signal flow is not too hot, because then it's going to peak, it's going to clip, it's going to distort, and you don't want it to be too soft. So you kind of want to meet in the middle there. You want to make sure you're kind of hitting that sweet spot. All right, so as long as I'm good, I can hit record. And we can just try and track some of this. Also, if you don't want to play, just you're bored of this dry guitar, once again, if you hit library, you can go here and it's going to give us some different options, effect-wise and with different plugins. So let's try New Wave Chorus. Cool. So basically, as you can see, it's put some compression and an EQ and an amp and some echo and the pedal board and things on our guitar track here. Let's try and play with this guy. Cool. So that's our audio in there. Now, if you want to extend everything we have going on, if you kind of hover your mouse up here, you'll see this, and you can easily just loop what you have going on like that. Or another way is just hold down Option, select everything you want, and just drag it and drop it. So if you're just holding Option on your keyboard, just dragging and dropping, that's my favorite way to just kind of fly things around. Your audio, you want to make sure that you don't have any clips when the audio ends or begins. So that's where the fade tool comes in handy. So up here again, your secondary cursor, this guy. If you hold down Command, just kind of crossfade these, because without it, you're just gonna hear this kind of, it doesn't sound natural, you know. So I think just kind of fading these guys. So there's not that kind of clip at the end. So yeah, the fade tool comes in handy. All right, so we have, this is our little thing that we got going Now, if you want to add a sample, like a splice sample or a voice memo or something that you have on your computer, you can just go up here to your browser, all files, and you can just kind of search. So for example, if I'm looking for a snare sound, and I would just type in snare, and I'll just kind of go through a couple of snare samples that I have, maybe pick this guy. I'm just going to drag him in, and Logic is going to make an audio track for that. So I'm just going to kind of hold down Option and just kind of drag him around and copy and paste where I want him to exist. Another cool thing about audio is that you can very easily manipulate it. So if I took this snare here, I could go over here and hit reverse, which basically is going to kind of give me this little sweep. I can in here. So audio gives you a lot more. I mean, same with the guitar. I can reverse, you know, this last guitar chord. That's always fun to play around with. All right, so if we wanted to put some vocals in here, we're gonna add another track. We're gonna add audio. My microphone is plugged into input 7. So I'm gonna select that. I'm gonna put vocal in here. All right. And once again, if you hit library, Logic is going to give you some channel strips and some presets for your vocal. So for example, let's go with bright vocal. It's going to give us a bit of EQ and compression. This is something that you can really play around with, because EQ, compression, and all that is very dependent on the microphone you're using, the tone of the voice that you're recording, the environment. It's very particular. So I just tend to play around until it sounds good to me. But this is kind of what it's setting us up with. I might add a little bit of reverb. So I'd go down here. If you don't want to hear any of these things, you can just hit this little power button. So they're kind of grayed out. But I'm going to add some Space Designer. If I want to hear myself, I'm going to make sure that this is enabled. Oh, that's a bit much. Whoa, whoa. Cool. So if I feel like that's all good to go. Obviously, I would usually record with headphones, but for this, I am not, which is why there's going to be track and metronome, click, bleed. But I obviously would recommend that you would record with headphones. but I'm just gonna track this real quick. All right, so just playing around and messing with my input as I go. You want to make sure your signal flow is obviously not too hot, not too weak. All right, so that's the vocal that we have going on. So once again, I would command, I would fade this guy. Let's say we're not too into the beginning of this, so let's go to our scissors tool, command. Let's delete this. Let's go back to fade. Let's fade this in slowly. So yeah, you can just play around with your reverb, play around. I mean, you have in here, you have phasers and flangers and tremolo and a bunch of things that you can really play around with. When you're ready to finish up what you've worked on, you can just go bounce. Or you can just run down to here to this guy. Bounce is an MP3. Add to music, it'll go right into your iTunes. If you want to automate your volume, it's this little guy here. You can choose what you want to automate, which basically means what you want to manipulate. Volume is kind of the easier one. If I wanted this electric piano to fade in, I'll just start this way down. Hear it fade in like that. That's your automation. If you want to keep track, I mean, you've got your colors here. You're pretty much good to go. Pretty much ready to make a song. I hope some of this was useful in some way. And good luck.